So welcome to Trigger Warnings and My Loaded Thoughts. I'm Dr. Benjamin Dowd-Arrow, a renowned, internationally recognized gun scholar. And this is a series where I just talk about the things that randomly pop into my head, most of which have to do with my research. Now, at this point, we've all heard about the tragedy that happened in Minneapolis at the Catholic school that left 2 children dead and 18 others injured. Now, normally, when it comes to these types of events, I take a stance known as no notoriety. Now, what that means is that we don't talk about the shooter at all, and there's a reason for that. We're not trying to obscure who the shooter is. We all know who the shooter is. We often just talk about the victims rather than the perpetrators of these acts. And there is, like I said, a reason for that. The reason is found in a theory called contagion theory. Contagion theory has shown that there is a statistical relationship between the amount of time that the media, including social media like myself, talk about the perpetrators of these acts and how many acts that follow the first one, right? So if we look at historically how often we talk about the perpetrators of these acts, we'll see that 2 or 3 other acts immediately follow because these people want infamy. They want to be famous. But the reason that I'm breaking away from that stance is because of bullshit like this, okay? There are people posting false information to try and breed hatred towards an entire community of people who are relatively safe, a group of people who are more likely to be victims than to victimize anyone else. A handful of mass shooters have been identified as being trans, but statistically, they make up less than 1% of mass shooters overall. If we want to actually look at the facts and see the actual pattern, 98% of mass shooters are white, 70% are men, and about 60% are straight white men. Now, while this individual may have been a trans individual or trans-identifying individual, more importantly, they were a conservative identifying individual, and they were acting on hatred and racist ideologies. So when we start looking at the motives for this person, we first of all find that the most common thing that mass shooters have in common is they have a list of grievances, and this person did. This person had a huge list of grievances of people that they were angry at and wanted to get revenge on. That's a very white male entitlement attitude. The other thing is that when we started looking into their motives, we find that they had a lot of anti-Semitic, anti-Black, anti-Hispanic viewpoints that were being fed by the current administration. Now, once upon a time, political ideology was not a good predictor for these types of events. That if you actually go back and you look, you can't really tell if they're a Democrat, Independent, Republican, because that wasn't really what was motivating these individuals to commit these acts. That's not really true the last couple of years, where more and more of these extreme violent acts are being perpetrated by the right wing, the extreme right wing in particular. And there are appearing to be a pattern of anti-LGBTQIA, anti-Black, anti-Jew, anti-Hispanic rhetorics tied around these people as they commit their events. But even more so is that list of grievances. They are angry at someone for taking something that they believe they were entitled to. And that motivation is important because I see people attacking the trans community, calling for their pattern, yet they refuse to call out the fact that most often these events are created by white men because of a white male entitlement to whatever it is they feel they deserve. And I don't see them having that same energy when it is a white, straight man that commits these acts. So it's just bigotry. It's just like when someone says Chicago and they're actually just invoking a racist dog whistle. This shift to trans is just to push a transphobic agenda and actually isn't about actually protecting lives at all. Because if you actually cared about children, if you actually cared about people's lives and safety, you wouldn't focus on the group that commits less than 1%. It's like 0.13% of these acts are committed by a trans individual, but 70% by men, 60% by straight white men. And of course, politicians have jumped on their usual thoughts and prayers wagon rather than actually doing anything to actually stop these kinds of events. They're just offering thoughts and prayers, which is useless. Thoughts and prayers are useless to dead children. Thoughts and prayers are actually useless to anyone. They have never solved anything in the history of the world. If we want to actually stop these events, we need to invoke policies that will actually stop these events. Let's talk about some that could potentially have stopped this from happening. Red flag laws. If a red flag law had been in place, this person had already been reported to police for making threats, for posting things on social media that indicated that they were a threat, and law enforcement did nothing because they weren't legally emboldened to do anything. There was no red flag laws that could force them to take guns from this person. And rather than try to solve the problems that lead to these events, politicians like J.D. Vance are attacking people for saying that thoughts and prayers are useless, because they are. And just like the Bible says that just praying is useless. In the Bible it says that faith without works is dead. And Republicans don't have works. They just say thoughts and prayers and they go on. Because what reality actually tells us from the history is that when a politician says thoughts and prayers, what they're really saying is fuck you. They're saying fuck you to the victims, fuck you to the families of the victims, and fuck you to anyone who got shot, wounded, or whatever. They're saying that their money coming from the NRA is more important than the lives lost, the children lost, or anyone hurt in these types of events. Because these politicians would rather have the money from groups like the NRA than actually do anything to keep kids safe. Following Parkland, Marco Rubio here in Florida said, fuck you, I'll never stop taking NRA money. And he said that to survivors of Parkland immediately following the event at Parkland. That kind of attitude indicates to us that the politicians don't actually care about Americans or their citizenry. All they care about is how much money that they're going to be getting from these individuals. And so that means that we, as a society, have to decide, do we want to remove these people from office, or do we want to just give up and allow more and more of our kids to die? Because that's what it boils down to. The reality is that stricter laws reduce the number of gun suicides, gun homicides, mass shootings, and accidental deaths. But Republicans don't want to talk about that. You had people like this guy, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who said that California and New York are so much worse than Texas when it comes to any form of gun death. But is that actually true? Well, let's look at the most recent data, and I do encourage you all to go to the CDC website and get this data, because this administration is very hostile to the truth, and I don't expect them actually to continue updating this or to keep this up for long, especially following this recent event. But this is the newest information. This is the 2023 data. It was just published this August in 2025. Here's California, near the top, okay, 8 per 100,000. California is 8 per 100,000. Minnesota is 8.9 per 100,000. Let's see where Texas is. We can see Texas is not on this screen. Well, here's Florida right there at 13.7, which is not quite double what California was. And there's Texas. Texas is 14.9, higher than Florida's. Again, almost double. That would imply that California is significantly safer for gun deaths than Texas or Florida are. And Skeletor also said that Texas was better than New York, but New York has a rate of 4.7 per 100,000, which means Texas is about 3 times as bad as New York. So when we start considering the realities that states with stricter laws have fewer deaths overall, we can see this pattern over and over and over. And if we look at these lists, we can see that the states that have the stricter laws are near the top, meaning that they are safer and have fewer deaths. And states with weaker laws are near the bottom. There's Indiana, which has a rate of 18.3 per 100,000. That's the surrounding state of Illinois, which is super important because Illinois is right up there, better than Florida, better than Texas at 13.5. And this is why I said Chicago is a racist dog whistle, because that state does better than Texas. So the point of all of this is that it's not trans individuals doing this. It is politically motivated straight white men overwhelmingly doing this. It is men with grievances, men who feel entitled to have the world handed to them like the 1950s model promised. Mediocre white men who are thinking that they're being denied something because they weren't given the keys to the kingdom. We can see that very readily with people like RFK, who was the epitome of that mediocre white man who is a DEI hire. In reality, he's not qualified for his job, and he only got it because he knew somebody. And that's really it. So these individuals are making decisions now that affect the health and welfare of others. And I bring up RFK on purpose because not only is the Health and Human Secretary, but he has made the comment that it was SSRIs that led to the attack in Minneapolis. And that's just not true. There's no credible evidence to support that statement. And yet here he is, one of the most powerful people in our government, making decisions that are going to affect the rest of us. And rather than addressing the real problem, which is white male entitlement, he is going to address something not linked at all, falling into pseudoscience or nonsense, like most of the people in the administration are doing right now, using transphobia, homophobia, fear of the migrant and all of that to justify the heinous and dumbassery that they're about to do. So anyway, this has been Trigger Warnings and My Loaded Thoughts. If you have any comments, questions, anything, let me know. Happy to address it. Otherwise, have a great day.